It comes as we have the video of Russia taking down an American drone. An Air Force Lieutenant General will show you exactly what was a $30 billion lifeline, the largest U.S. bank to be on the edge of collapse, given a mass cash infusion by other banks. In a moment, I'll speak to a Nobel Prize winner who saw this banking crisis coming and called for it clearly 5 months ago. And an out-front investigation tonight. CNN finding the U.S. Coast Guard failed to act after 2 women came forward to say they were sexually assaulted on U.S. ships. A damning report from our Pamela Brown ahead. Let's go out front. And good evening, I'm Erin Burnett. Out front tonight, rooting out Russians. We're seeing for the first time how Ukrainians are storming homes in Bakhmut, homes where Russians had been hiding. And you see the soldier come in here, immediately start firing. According to the Ukrainian unit, which recorded this footage, they fire because they say, quote, they never know for sure if there's a wounded Russian in the house who wants to take you with them. And you can see in this video how then they carefully approach another home. They will go inside. You see they immediately open fire as they go in. Now, according to the battalion, by the time they reach the neighborhood that you're looking at right here in this new video, the Russians had moved out, not wanting to die, they say. And you just hear that shooting, just to imagine, what it would be like to be there. This comes as the Wagner chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin, gives an interview blaming Russia's military for the frontline failure, saying that they won't help him win in Bakhmut because they're jealous that his forces were the ones who notched Russia's win in the tiny town of Soledar.
It's about the shell shortage, the flight cutoffs, the removal of these military phones, yes? I can't call anybody, and nobody can call me. Well, leave the phone, put a wiretap on it. You know what I'm talking about? Put childhood to bed. You can't be acting like a child. War is a very serious job.
Prigozhin directing those words at the Kremlin, accusing them of acting like children. And he also then went on to defend his use of prisoners, despite Putin's military now blocking him from recruiting more. Listen to this.
There is a reduced sense of self-preservation, just like me. If my time comes, then so be it. You know, I just don't really give a f***. That's number one. The second is my cockiness, because you won't get me the f*** out of here. I came here, and I'm staying here. That's the second thing. And the third thing is unpretentiousness.
Interesting. The things he says he has in common with the convicts that he's recruited. But he also admitted then that only about 7% of the convicts that he's recruited return for another stint. That's lower than he has previously suggested. And by the way, just to be really black and white clear about this here, they're not returning in most cases because they're dead. Now, Prigozhin's expletive-filled rant coming on a day of high tension. Tonight, the United States accusing Russia of lying about taking down an American drone. And we're seeing for the first time the shocking aerial video of that incident. I'm going to play for you the video. You see the Russian jet swooping in behind the drone, right? You see that swooping in. Jet appears to drop fuel on it. Then you see the video glitch. Now, we'll pause there for just a second because Lieutenant General Charlie Moore will tell us this is the exact moment of impact. And he said that there is no doubt that this was both aggressive and reckless in terms of a move by an extremely maneuverable and agile Russian fighter jet. In this shot, you then will see what appears to be the damaged propeller, which ultimately brought the drone down. Now, this video catching Russia in a lie, which raises the question of whether they're telling the truth about the explosion at an FSB border patrol building in southern Russia. The FSB, of course, the intelligence for Russia. The building quickly went up in flames. Now, obviously, Russia immediately claimed this was the result of an electrical short circuit. They didn't want to have their FSB possibly have been attacked. But, of course, a building belonging to the FSB on fire like this is raising questions and fears in Russia. And there's a lot to get to tonight. I want to begin with Natasha Bertrand, who is out front live at the Pentagon tonight. Natasha, what more are you learning about this drone incident?
Yeah, Erin, we are learning that the U.S. believes that the Russians have been able to collect some of that debris from the drone that crashed into the Black Sea. But we're also hearing more today about why the U.S. chose to declassify this video and release it now. We are told, according to the White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby, that the reason is pretty simple. They believe Russia flat out lied, and they want to correct the narrative.
This is the moment just before a Russian fighter jet collided with a U.S. drone over the Black Sea. The thick plumes of smoke, jet fuel being vented by the Russian Su-27 as it passes. We don't see the moment of impact, but here is the propeller of the MQ-9 Reaper drone undamaged, and here it is later, clearly damaged.
It had to have been some kind of an impact, and I don't think, while the fuel spill on top of the aircraft, on top of the MQ-9 would have been significant, I don't think it would have caused that damage.
The newly declassified footage appears to directly contradict Russia's claim that the aircraft did not make physical contact.
There was no collision. You said that the problem is that we didn't contact to this drone.
The Russians have been just flat out lying about their accounts.
The U.S. has not yet determined whether the pilots intended to directly hit the drone, forcing the U.S. military to crash the drone into the Black Sea some 80 nautical miles from land.
We know that the intercept was intentional. We know that the aggressive behavior was intentional. We also know it was very unprofessional and very unsafe. The actual contact of the fixed-wing Russian fighter with our UAV, the physical contact of those two, not sure yet.
But CNN is learning that the Russian pilots did not go rogue. U.S. officials familiar with the intelligence say the pilots were ordered to harass the drone by senior officials in Russia's defense ministry. For now, the fate of the drone's wreckage remains unclear. The U.S. has no naval assets in the Black Sea that can readily retrieve it, and the Russians have already reached the crash site and recovered some small pieces of debris. But the U.S. took steps to wipe the drone's software, officials tell CNN, making it highly unlikely that Moscow will glean anything valuable from its remnants.
We did take mitigating measures, so we are quite confident that whatever was of value is no longer of value.
So we're learning tonight, Aaron, as well, that the U.S. is now conducting an assessment of its drone operations over the Black Sea. But we should note that that does not include a complete moratorium on the drone flights over the Black Sea. Apparently, the U.S. has already flown yet another mission in the area with the same model of drone that previously collided with those Russian jets. Aaron.
All right, Natasha, thank you very much for that reporting. And now let's go to Andrei Soldatov, the Russian investigative journalist whose website, agentura.ru, has been blocked in Russia. He is the author of The Compatriots, the Russian exiles who fought against the Kremlin. Also with me tonight, retired Lieutenant General Charlie Tuna Moore, former Vice Director for Operations at NORAD. So thanks very much to both of you. General Moore, I just want to start with the drone and go through this footage. When U.S. officials tell CNN the Russian pilots were ordered to harass the drone by senior Russian defense officials, it puts this in context. So let's show the video again. Can you tell us exactly what you're seeing and what it tells you about the Russian pilots? Here's a video.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, I draw a couple of conclusions from the tape. The first is the most obvious, that now we have definitive proof that we did have contact between the Sukhoi 27 flankers and the MQ-9, unlike what the Russians have been telling us for the last 24 plus hours. So I think that's pretty definitive now. The other thing that I notice in the tape as we continue to watch it through is that first we get a good look at what type of weapons the Su-27 is actually carrying. If you look underneath its wingtips, you'll see it has at least 4 air-to-air missiles. I see 2 radar-guided missiles and 2 infrared-guided missiles on the aircraft. So had they wished to actually bring this remotely piloted aircraft down, the safe thing to do, the most efficient and effective way to do that, would have been simply to shoot it down using one of those weapons. I think it's pretty illogical to think that the plan would have been to actually ram into the MQ-9 and risk the Su-27 and, of course, even the life of the pilot. The other thing that I notice on the tape starts at the very beginning, and you have to look at the intercept geometry. What do I mean by that? If you're going to try to intercept an aircraft like we have in this particular incident, I'm going to set my altitude out at a pretty far range, slightly above that of the target aircraft, in this case, the MQ-9. And as I get closer, I'm going to do very fine-tuning adjustments to make sure I pass as close or as far away as I intend. What you see in the video is that the Su-27 begins co-altitude, so the same altitude as the MQ-9. As it gets closer and starts to dump its fuel, it drops in altitude below the MQ-9, which means very late in that intercept, he's trying to climb above the MQ-9. He doesn't quite make it and clips a propeller. All of that tells me that this incident, in terms of the actual collision, is most likely simply due to pilot incompetence.
Well, and it's pretty clear to use those words and pretty powerful to use them, pilot incompetence. Andre, how is this being seen in Russia, where obviously there's just been a basic lie about what happened that is now contradicted by the actual video?
Yes, but to be honest, in the military circles, we see a jubilation. Actually, lots of people, they proclaim a pilot a hero. Now we have people collecting money to give him some sort of award. And I think the reason is very simple. The Russian army is quite desperate to find some sign of victory, and things in Bakhmut are not going really well. So now we are trying to portray this incident as a victory.
Yeah, General Moore, it's pretty interesting when you say, look, what you see there is pilot incompetence, and they're portraying it as a victory. I mean, Putin this week was on a helicopter flight simulator, pretending to be whatever he was, during a trip to an aviation plant, right? It's all part of trying to make the Russian Air Force look strong. So when you see this drone video that you've walked us through and you talk about pilot incompetence, what does that show you about the true training and ability of Russian pilots?
Well, what we know is that they don't nearly get the amount of training, the flight hours that U.S. or most of our NATO pilots get, whether you look at it weekly, monthly, or annually. Mm-hmm. On top of that, we know the type of training that they conduct when they do get those flight hours isn't nearly as rigorous or as complicated. So what you end up with is a pilot corps that simply isn't as competent as U.S. Fighter pilots.
It's amazing when you see that. And as you talk about it, it's incompetence. It was a mistake the way that it played out. So, Andre, I mentioned earlier also this fire at that FSB headquarters in Rostov. The governor of that region said it was caused by an electrical short circuit. Now, sometimes the Russians are quick to try to blame the Ukrainians for these things. This is obviously an important site. It's the FSB, so they said it was an accident. It's unclear, right? What do you think happened?
I think the problem is that it doesn't actually matter what happened here. What matters is how it's seen by people in the military and in the FSB. The problem here is that Rostov-on-Don is not just some regional town in Russia. It is a very important logistic hub for the Russian army and for the FSB personnel to be sent to the occupied territories to do their 3 months tour of duty. So it is seen, and lots of people suspect that it is an attack by the Ukrainians in the very heart of the Russian military effort in the south.
And to where this war is heading at this very moment as we talk about Bakhmut, 2 quick points. General Moore, first to you. We have just learned today that Ukraine will be getting fighter jets, specifically MiG-29s from Poland in the coming days. Obviously, they're trained on those. Will that change anything for Ukraine?
I think it's definitely going to help the effort. They have lost some aircraft during the operations over the last year. But I think the best thing about MiG-29s coming from Poland is that the Ukrainians already know how to not only fly these airplanes, but they know how to perform the maintenance on these airplanes to keep them airborne and keep them in the fight. And that's very, very important. They don't have that experience when you start talking about a lot of the Western aircraft that we're talking about, like F-16s or Typhoons or the like.
Right, and training required on that. Now, Andre, the sanctions obviously crucial as well to what sort of pressure is being put on Russia at home. You have some new reporting on that and how they are not working in a crucial area.
Yes, unfortunately, what we see that the Russian cybersecurity industry actually grew by 20% in 2022, mostly because this industry benefited from the void left by the Western companies leaving the country. And what the Russian cybersecurity companies are getting, they got contracts, but also they got brains, they got IT engineers who used to work for the Western companies, and now they remain in the country, and they started working for the Russian cybersecurity companies. And we all know that Russian cybersecurity companies, they are actually working really closely with the Russian military and Russian security services. So it's all actually benefits the Russian military and cybersecurity effort.
Tonight, less than 2,000 seconds. That's how quickly a North Korean intercontinental ballistic missile could reach the United States center of the mainland if the U.S. missile defense system failed. This is according to a new study by Chinese defense researchers. And the warning comes as North Korea launched yet another long-range ballistic missile, its 4th ICBM launch already this year. These images released by state television showing Kim Jong-un overseeing the launch with that child believed to be his daughter, widely thought to be his anticipated successor. Will Ripley is out front.
In the skies near Japan, F-15s on the hunt for a suspected North Korean intercontinental ballistic missile, capturing what could be its last seconds in flight. This rare video, released by Japan's military, experts say the burning object resembles a ballistic missile boost rocket re-entering the atmosphere, flying for about an hour at hypersonic speeds.
If there's no interception or the interception fails, an ICBM launch from North Korea would take a little bit more than 30 minutes to reach the homeland U.S. and also depending on if it's the West Coast or the East Coast will take slightly more time.
Chinese scientists simulated a North Korean nuclear attack. According to the South China Morning Post, the simulation shows 33 minutes from the time of launch to the time of impact. if U.S. missile defenses fail to shoot down the ICBM.
Missile defense begins here.
For years, U.S. leaders have reassured the public.
The nation should be very confident.
And America's allies.
Easily shoot them out of the sky.
Missile defense systems can keep them safe. But virtually all ballistic missiles travel at more than 5 times the speed of sound, sometimes faster.
It's been described as hitting a bullet with a bullet, trying to hit a warhead.
3, 2, 1, ignition.
A report last year finding America's missile defense system, the nation's best, perhaps only line of defense, only succeeds about half the time.
If North Korea were to fire nuclear-armed ICBMs at the United States, we cannot be assured that our missile defense system would prevent the deaths of millions.
A U.S. Missile Defense Agency report last year said the missile defense system has demonstrated a measured capability to defend the United States, deployed forces, and allies from a rogue nation's missile attack. But that rogue nation has a fast-growing arsenal. Kim Jong-un's military is mass-producing ICBMs. He knows a barrage of ballistic missiles could be too much for the U.S. to shoot down.
Well, I mean, it's pretty sobering reporting, especially considering so many of these missile defense tests, the missile defense shield tests, have not gone well for the United States. And you're talking about North Korea specifically with these missiles. What about missiles that would start from China or Russia?
Well, this is the scary thing that a lot of people probably don't know. Yes, the U.S. missile defense system might be able to defend against an attack from a rogue state like North Korea, as long as their program doesn't get too big, or maybe Iran. But China, Russia, the size of their arsenals, if they launched nuclear missiles at the U.S., just like if the U.S. launched nuclear missiles at them, there'd be no way to shoot even close to all of them down. It would be essentially, this is the definition of mutually assured destruction. North Korea is trying to get there too. They're trying to get to the point that the U.S. wouldn't be able to shoot their missiles down, because then they become a nuclear power, which is what Kim Jong-un has always wanted.
All right. Thank you very much, Will Ripley. Live from Taipei tonight. And next, a new report revealing just how close 2 passenger jets came to colliding.
Did you know that despite the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, it's still possible to visit parts of Ukraine? But which parts can one visit, and how do you enter the country? To tell us more, we're joined by Lyubov Abravitova, Ukraine's ambassador to South Africa. Ambassador, thanks so much for your time. It was a little bit jarring when I clicked on this video and preparing to watch a YouTube channel that I'm familiar with, and there I see sponsored by Visit Ukraine, come on a holiday or a tour to Ukraine, despite it being engaged in the middle of a massive conflict. Good morning, Ambassador.
Good morning, Lester. Good morning to all the listeners. Thank you for this opportunity to talk to you, and I think your topic is very interesting indeed to discuss.
Tell us, there are parts and sectors of Ukraine's economy that is still slowly grinding, and that includes your tourism industry.
Obviously, the first thing when you think of the country in war, that it's dangerous to go there. But let me tell you a very pathetic thing, that the world is not the safe place today. It's everywhere where it's not safe, and especially when you see those actions of Russia that stay unpunished and not even called as they are by many countries in the world. But Ukrainian economy is still surviving for this year and developing all the sectors of cooperation. The poets continue to participate and to write in a different platforms. The musicians are performing, the architects are building or rebuilding, the energy sector is carrying on. So the country is trying to live through the war, carrying the daily burden.
Of course, hostilities, conflict concentrated towards the east of the country. Kyiv situated in sort of north-central Ukraine. It is a no-fly zone over Ukraine. How are you expecting tourists to enter the country?
Well, the logistical part obviously is more complicated than it was before the invasion. But let me remind you that what started in 2014, which never stopped world tourists to come in Ukraine. Now, when the flights are not available, the only way how you can get in Ukraine is through the bordering countries. in the West. So basically, you are arriving to any of them, and you can either take the train or go by bus or by vehicles.
So you enter via neighboring countries like Poland,
Romania,
Moldova. How many people are taking this opportunity? Look, many countries would have advisory say, look, it is an active conflict zone. What are your figures looking like? We've commemorated just last month a year since this war started. How are you measuring and tracking how many people are actually visiting Ukraine as a tourism destination?
You will be surprised that even from South Africa, we see quite a big number of people traveling today to Ukraine and from the countries of the region. A lot of Ukrainians are coming in and out in order to participate in different international events. Myself, in December, I made the trip to Ukraine, to Kiev, and from Kiev to Mykolaiv. So even in the zones that are heavily affected by Russian invasion and shellings and missile alarms are happening, we still have the rail communication, and you don't need any particular organization to take you through from one city to another. You can book all your tickets online and just go. Of course, there must be precautions because you never know which parts of Ukraine and how it will be affected. But most of the times, the anti-missile systems are working and the alarms are coming in time, what gives people time to hide to the safest place.
In the Geography Now video that I saw, the host saying that there's a lot of precaution that goes into you are briefed on what precautions to take. It's a country that is in its entirety still under martial law. There are still curfews, that there is procedure that you are briefed on. If there is an air raid siren, that there is a phone application that you have to download before you enter the country to ensure that you get informed on whether there is an incoming attack. There is a lot of homework that you have to do before you even set foot in Ukraine.
Yes, exactly, and these are the precautions that you have to learn, and that is why these resources are available. We better have to think why it's important for many foreigners to come to Ukraine at this particular time, not only to see on their own eyes and to feel how it feels for Ukrainian people to be under Russian aggression, but also to see what Ukraine still has as a heritage, as a culture, and what we are trying to preserve, why we are fighting so hardly for our land. Those sightseeings that today is advertised by the different tourism organizations is one thing. Another thing is what kind of experience today Ukraine is having while Russia is damaging heavily our electrical infrastructure, for example. And a lot of specialists are very interested on how Ukraine can managed to get back power in a couple of hours after being bombing to the population. So this is another part that really attracts international tourists. And ecological researchers and scientists are coming in because, Ukraine went through difficult times after Chernobyl catastrophe. And today when we're facing another nuclear threat in Zaporizhia, then scientists from all the world are trying to get in and also to facilitate the process of not going in this disaster again. So it's different phases of tourism that can attract and still attracting the foreign people. But again, this is of course already a very evolutioned type of tourism, and obviously when people are coming, they have to learn all the precautions that are existing.
I have to ask, which company is looking and willing to underwrite the travel insurance, the tourism insurance, to travel? And I'm looking at the Visit Ukraine page, and there's a specific section when it talks about the insurance.
You know, when the person, and South Africans, for example, still need visas to go to Ukraine, is applying for the visa, one of the most important things that we have to receive and you have to provide is the insurance. And I never had any issues yet with insurance companies to provide these papers.